And we can just chit chat here for a couple minutes so people get the live notification, have a chance to jump in.
Absolutely.
Got a few people coming in already. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to be starting up the post-game show here in just a couple minutes. That was not what anyone was hoping for.
Rough is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, very. 1913. I'm just going to update a banner here, everyone. And put that one. There we go. All right. Let us get this thing going here. All right. Welcome into Not Your Average Bears post-game show. I am Bill Zimmerman, excited to be joined by this guy. We have not had a chance to do a podcast yet together, so I am looking forward to it. He is Mason West. Of course, you know him from Bare Bones on Thursday evenings live on the Second City Gridiron YouTube channel. And of course, he's joined every week by Danny Meehan. But, great with injuries, great with Bears insight, and a great day to have him on. We'll see if he has any insight on maybe what's going on with Justin Fields. But he joins me now. Mason, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Not too bad. Really thought coming on here it was going to be a different vibe. Was pretty sure that the Bears were going to look different, if not actually come away with the win. But, they Bears it up as normal.
Yep, they keep finding new ways to lose, and this one was definitely flat. So let's kind of progress through this, and let's start with the quarterback play, because I think that's where the sensible place is to start. I was looking forward to this game. I was actually the only one on Windy City Gridiron that picked the Vikings to win, and I'm certainly not trying to pat myself on the back. But what I did think we were going to have was a game that had some fun offense. I didn't trust Matt Eberflus's defense against Kirk Cousins, which is never a sentence you really want to say out loud, but that's the truth. I thought with the way the Vikings, I knew Brian Flores was going to blitz a lot, but that's more to try and cover up the warts of his defense. I thought Justin Fields was going to have some success, but even, let's talk about Justin Fields' performance before the injury. Just very, blah. I don't know the right word here, just not a lot from Justin today. Misread a couple blitzes and got hit pretty hard, had to rely on his legs a lot more. I think the blocking let him down. I think some of the plays that Getsy was calling up, a lot of screens, a lot of short stuff again. I didn't like that either. It's always tough to really get a full gauge as to what was wrong with the offense, so we have a chance to kind of watch it and look at the coach's tape. But from the broadcast view, Mason, just one of those games from Justin Fields that you just wished you got a little bit more out of him.
Yeah, I mean, right from the jump, right? First play on offense, he gets blasted on the backside. Now, kind of like you're alluding to, what was the issue there? Because usually, there's not enough people to block. There's 6 guys on the line, 5 linemen. Justin has to know there's someone that's going to be uncovered. It seemed like they expected off the edge there on that left side. But also the setup is weird because normally, if Justin's first reads to the right, you want that player that you're reading, the first one off the edge, in his line of vision at the same time. So, is it a Justin issue? Is it a scheme issue? Honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag on that. He was able to get some stuff going on the ground, which usually when he does that, he can start to heat up, but he just never really got settled in. Even the run game was suffering from the beginning, which actually seemed like it opened up a little bit later in the game. But overall, just rough. And like you said, it's going to be ultimately hard until we can look back and see what did those routes look like downfield. Was he missing open guys like we've seen in the second week? Were guys not getting open? What's the scenario there?
Yeah, and there was one play that was highlighted on the broadcast where DJ Moore was open, where potentially Fields could have gotten him. But again, all quarterbacks miss guys from time to time. But you're kind of talking about the scheme and the edge and the free release players and things like that. And here's the thing, and this is where someone that has X's and O's and knows the full scale better than me, I'd want to talk to about, because we keep seeing this, and I understand it's part of the play call that in certain things, like on Justin's naked boots, that edge is, he's got to beat that edge to the outside to make the play. Like I get that. And on this play here, like the first play of the game, there was as far as I could tell, Larry Borum went the direction of the entire offensive line. Like they went that way. But what's clearly happening is whether Justin's missing it or whether the defense is reading it so well based on how the offense is lining up, which would be a Getsy issue. When they're left free, when those edges are left free, they are causing total havoc on these offensive plays on a regular basis. And again, maybe some of those are Justin's issues, maybe they're Getsy's issues, but it's a consistent issue that whosever issue it is, you gotta tighten it up.
Well, and not just that, right? You go to then the next play where they do this little pitch toss over to Darrington Evans. First of all, why not run it with Foreman? Second of all, why are we going laterally so much on a team that's very aggressive getting upfield right now? Later in the game, yes, some of those more lateral plays worked, but now all of a sudden, because that tackle happens in the backfield, you're just sitting at this huge deficit that you're having to overcome. And no offense to Justin, I don't necessarily want him having to operate from a third and whatever that was, 20, 21, something of that nature. So, to me, it also it seemed like it got away from what worked the last couple weeks. How many times did you see the pocket move? I don't think I saw it very often. It was a lot of 3-5 step straight dropbacks, trying to read 1, 2, 3. And that's just not really where Justin is right now, or maybe ever will be.
And that was actually going to be the next thing I brought up, was where were some of the things we saw Luke Getsy do the last couple weeks, moving the pocket. So, some of these things that we've honestly, a lot of us have been screaming about the first 3 weeks of the season was why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And these play calls, this, game plan from the offense was a lot more in line with what we saw through weeks 1 through 3 than what it was with weeks 4 or 5. I mean, Justin was flat in the pocket, straight drops almost every time. When he did move around, most of the time it was because he was flushed. It wasn't designed. And it's again, and that's the thing. Like, we can sit here and say Justin didn't play well, and he absolutely did not play well. This was not, after what we saw the last 2 weeks, this is not the way we wanted to see Justin Fields play. But again, why is Luke Getsy reverting back to things that he did 3 weeks ago is just mind-boggling to me.
It's almost like Getsy thinks like this is truly what an NFL offense should be. And, whether that's true or not, you have to understand who you have to work with, who's your quarterback, what's your offensive line, things of that nature. And he just refuses to be malleable. Whether it's a frustration thing on his end, where, again, he thinks this on offense should work, whether it's a lack of creativity, like he can't keep continuing to come up with some of these moving concepts. It's incredibly frustrating as, a fan. It's incredibly frustrating as someone that wants the Bears and Justin to succeed. And ultimately, I'm concerned about what that's going to be down the road, right? And I think there's a reason why we'll get to that in a little bit, why I think Bagent may have looked a little bit better, in the short time that he had, was because I think that fits a little bit more traditionally what Getsy wants, which seems to be this pocket passer. It's truly just 3-step drop, stick it, throw it.
And this is what gets really frustrating, is when you have players, and let's stick with quarterbacks here, when you can identify their strengths. And we can go all the way back to Mitch Trubisky, and I'm not going to bag on Mitch Trubisky, but we know what Mitch's strengths were, right? It was the same kind of thing. You needed to move the pocket around. You needed to cut the field in half. You couldn't give Mitch Trubisky, 4 reads, 5 reads, whatever it was, and have him throw the football. You needed to simplify things for Mitch. Matt Nagy continued to refuse to do that. Finally, when he put Bill Lazor in there, Bill Lazor did some things. And in, what was it? It was 2020 when Mitch went on that heater in December for like 3 weeks. And again, they weren't great defenses, but Bill Lazor was building an offense that fit Mitch Trubisky's skills better. And I don't understand when, like, we see, Greg Roman come in and create an offense for Lamar Jackson. Did it have limitations? Of course it had limitations, but he looked at what Lamar Jackson's skill set was and he created an offense for it. Mike McDaniel is getting guys wide open. He is fitting what Tua can do, and he is making an explosive offense with it. Of course, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are certainly going to help, but he's using speed, getting guys open, and creating things that Tua can do on the field. I don't understand why we as a franchise cannot find coaches that don't sit there and go, I'm running my defense, I'm running my offense, whatever it might be. I am not going to evolve and fit it to the personnel skill sets that are on my roster. It is a continued problem with this Bears franchise. And today, watching Luke Getsy, it certainly felt like we were going, when he finally was doing things to help Justin and utilize Justin's skills more. It was the same thing last year where the offense was terrible and Luke Getsy said, you know what, we're just going to let Justin just let it rip, run, just use his athleticism, and they started scoring points. Now the rest of the roster wasn't good enough, so they were losing games, whatever it was, 45 to 35, whatever it was. But now we're seeing the same thing where you finally get some things going for Justin, and you're going back to things that you did, screen after screen after screen today. We had seen almost no screens. Just going back to how apparently, like you said, how Luke Getsy apparently wants to run things like he tried to run against the Packers. He was doing it more today. Just very frustrating.
I think it almost goes back to it in a way. You had a great interview with Josh Lucas, and he talked about for the quarterback position how you need to have static versus dynamic, crystallized versus fluid intelligence. The same thing can be said about these coaches. And are you looking for that when you're interviewing for your head coach, when you're interviewing for your offensive or your defensive coordinators? Can you within a week, can you within a day, within a quarter, right, change and be malleable to what's in front of you? And right now it seems like Luke Getsy's not that he can't do that. And that's even a concern, I would say, going back into, again, the interview process. Luke Getsy didn't call plays in Green Bay, and now you're asking him to call plays. That's been a problem. What was he in charge of when he was in Green Bay, right? Was he in charge of creating a dynamic flowing offense, or was he simply the red zone guy? Was he simply the run game guy? Those are the things you have to be able to pull out and tease and get when you're looking at these individuals. And right now, how do you do that? The people in the top, whether you're talking about this committee that went in, was in charge of hiring the GM, the head coach, the what does that look like? And another layer to that's really interesting is, as far as I can know, there's not really a connection between Eberflus and Getsy. So how well do they really know each other? How does that process go? That's a question that I have, and ultimately something that has to change as we're moving forward, because as of right now, this coaching staff ain't it.
Yeah, and we're going to get to the coaching staff because I agree with you. It's just another game where they just left a lot of things on the field. The players were going above the schemes to try and make the few plays that were made. This coaching staff just continues to struggle. But before we get to that and a couple other things, let's talk about the injury here before we move over to Bagent, kind of do this linearly here with the quarterbacks. So Fields, obviously, we saw you got taken down, comes out of the game. And I'll be honest, and I'm coming from a place of no knowledge. So everyone listening, I want you to know that I have no medical background at all. My thought was when he got ruled out, because, the only thing they can do at the stadium is X-ray. When he got ruled out almost immediately, and it's got tweeted out that he was not going to return. To me, I assume that meant that there was something that came up on the X-ray, that there was some kind of break, and that they knew he wasn't going to come back in. But then we find out after the game, Matt Eberflus, in his post-game press conference, said that the X-rays were negative. Now, beyond that, we don't have any other information as to what's going on with this injury. So Mason, I guess I'll ask you, like, what potential kind of soft tissue injury could be going on in the hand there, and how can you rule someone out so quickly with something like that?
At the end of the day, and I'll answer your last question first, it could have been as simply, can he hold a football, right? Like, so if they did the X-ray, they say, all right, here, Justin, throw me the ball, and he just can't get a good grip on it. The spiral isn't there, the strength isn't there. You're not going to play if you can't do that. It doesn't make sense just to have someone that's going to hand off the ball, especially against what this team needs from him is his big arm and his deep ball accuracy. So that honestly could be a reason why he was ruled out as quickly as he was, just functionality. And I had the same impression as you did when I first saw the injury. The mechanism was a little funky. Is it exactly your traditional fracture mechanism? No. But again, when you get ruled out that quickly, that's the biggest concern. And now, could there still be some stuff there that is still leading to that thumb weakness that I think may have been present, ultimately leading to be out of the game? Absolutely. So, for example, in a avulsion fracture, you may not fully see necessarily the actual break there. It just might be this amorphous kind of just some swelling in there, but you're still not going to have use of that thumb, because with an avulsion fracture, the tendon can no longer pull on the thumb and create that strength you need. So now that's why they're going to the MRI, because ultimately an X-ray doesn't show the soft tissue. It really doesn't show swelling very well. MRI should highlight if there's a tear within one of the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, something of that nature that would make him be unable to operate as a quarterback.
So, and let me just kind of ask you this, with soft tissue injuries in the hand like this is the type of thing where there could be no structural issue. And like you said, it was just too painful for him to grip a football, and he could be back next week, or he could be out, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it might be, with a more significant injury. Are we looking at right now? Is it that, as we speculate, and again, I stress speculate, we know nothing other than the fact that the x-rays on the hand were negative. Is that the kind of the range we're looking at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the unfortunate part when it comes to more of the soft tissue stuff. Again, whether you're talking about muscle, tendon, ligament, is that you have to put grades to it, right? Grade 1 is, low key, grade 2, a little bigger, grade 3 is a partial tear, grade 4 is a complete. And anywhere you fall in that spectrum is going to change things. Now, acuteness matters, right? Like you said, it happened today right away, a lot of pain, a lot of swelling. That could prevent you from being able to hold, throw a football. But within a week, you could be back. You could be functional. You maybe just need a little bit of a splint on that thumb in order to give it some stability. If it's something a little bit bigger, you're looking at a much longer timeline here. Now, again, if there is like a more of a grade 3 or grade 4, and that's something that knocks you out. A good example of that compare contrast, right? Justin last year had that AC joint sprain. We're still going to consider that soft tissue because you're not breaking the bone or anything. It's affecting, a ligament. And he was able to come back after a couple weeks out. Compare that to Anthony Richardson, who likely is going to be having season-ending injury. Same joint, totally different timelines.
Interesting. So at this point, look, all we can say is we hope Justin gets back as soon as possible, just for honestly our enjoyment as Bears fans and his health and making sure he's out there. But as of right now, we're just going to have to wait, and we'll hear something from the Bears here in the next couple of days, because I'm sure they're going to run plenty of tests and figure this out. But, regardless, right now Fields was out, did miss the rest of the game, and Tyson Bagent did come in. We'd be remiss if we did not talk about Bagent here for a little bit, because look, he did some nice things on the field, and I am not going to sit here. First of all, this is what I'm going to say. In no way possible does Tyson Bagent, and I don't care if he had a touchdown drive that was nice, in no way possible does Tyson Bagent give this team a better chance to win if he is on the field than Justin Fields. That is not anywhere. Even if he does a couple things better than Fields, the things he doesn't do as good as Fields are woefully less. So there, he did have the nice drive. He made a couple nice plays on there, but he made 2 horrendous decisions with the football that you would expect an undrafted free agent from a Division II college to make in his debut. And he cost the Bears dearly with those couple decisions. So, overall, for who Tyson Bagent is, I thought his debut was pretty darn good. I was not, when Tyson Bagent came in and had to try and rally the Bears to a victory, I didn't expect it to happen. I saw some positives, because for me, Tyson Bagent is auditioning for backup quarterback. Can he be the backup, whether Justin Fields is here or whether they make decisions, after this season to change? Tyson Bagent is auditioning to remain the Bears QB2. And I think his overall debut was pretty solid in that regard, but I certainly am not seeing, Mason, some guy who is going to turn into Tony Romo by 2024.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think he played exactly like you'd expect for someone who's a Division II quarterback who, listing off some of his stats, right? He played 53 games, attempted over 2,000 passes, 1,400 yards, 68-ish% completion percentage, and 159 touchdowns to 48 interceptions. That's a great combination of stats for a Division II quarterback. And again, undrafted free agent coming in. That's just how you kind of expect him to play. He's a very good see open guy, throw open guy, or even maybe with a little bit of anticipation. But he just doesn't have a big enough arm to ultimately be a long-term NFL starter. He's got a little bit of some quickness, right? He's got some legs. He's not a statue back there. But we saw on that one read he had where he pulled it and ran, he almost fell on his face. He was able to keep his legs and he ran for 3-4 yards on that. And it was great. You got this positive game, but he's not the explosive athlete Justin Fields is either. Or ultimately any of these other quarterbacks you're hoping you would be your long-term answer. So like you said, great. Love you in a pinch. Your quarterback has to sit for a series, maybe a week or two, hold, keep the ship tight, but he should not be your long-term answer. And he's not ultimately going to be that for the Bears. So you're also kind of hoping at this stage that maybe he doesn't steal you too many games while Justin's out.
Yeah, I mean, look, and as I think you summarized a lot of what Tyson, the positives and the negatives, you summarized it well. And I think overall for this kid, if Fields is going to miss a few games, he's going to get an opportunity to play here. There's no point to go to Nathan Peterman. You may as well see what you have with Tyson Bagent. And again, Can Tyson Bagent beat the Raiders potentially? Sure, the Raiders are not a good football team. If Justin's out a long time, could he potentially beat the Panthers in a few weeks? Sure, he could potentially do that. So, there's going to be opportunities for him to get a victory. But again, I want Bears fans to make sure they don't get caught up. Like if he wins, if he plays and the Bears win next week, that this is some magical Tyson Bagent ride that we're all going to get on here, and he's going to rally this team for the season. That's not the type of situation he's in right now as a quarterback. He's just, if he's going to get reps, that's all it is. It's reps for him to grow and continue to get better. And I think it's important for Bears fans to stay level-headed and keep expectations where they should be. This is not someone, Tony Romo is I bring up Tony Romo because he's really the only guy that I can think of this century that was an undrafted free agent as a quarterback and went on to have a very successful career. Like that's how rare it is. That's why I bring up Romo when we do the comparisons to Bagent. Again, he was a very small school guy, was sat behind quarterbacks for a couple of years, got his opportunity and performed well. So if Tyson Bagent ever develops that well, which is 1% chance that he ever gets that good, it's not going to be as a rookie. He is going to take time. And when I say time, years to try and learn the NFL, have his speed and his clock catch up to where it needs to be. Yeah, he gets through his reads pretty quickly. I saw a couple times, it looked like he checked out 2-3 reads before he dumped the ball off. You like to see that. He progresses through things quickly, which to me is a great attribute to have as a backup quarterback, right? Backup quarterback is a game manager. And if the game manager can get through the reads quickly, get the ball off, even if it's short passes, we saw Bagent try and throw the ball down the field a couple times. The arm's not great. He did complete one of them, but it was, for lack, I don't like using the term, but a hospital ball to DJ Moore. You just let DJ get crushed on that. That's why Bagent has limitations. He doesn't have that deep ball accuracy. Even trying to get the ball to Tyler Scott had to come literally back 20 yards to get that ball for a 4-yard gain. So we see the limitations with Bagent, but smart quarterback gets the ball out quickly most of the time. That's an ideal attribute for a backup quarterback. Like if things were different and the Bears were leading when he came in, you sit there and say, that's the type of quarterback that can maintain a lead. That's the type of quarterback that if your starter misses 2 or 3 games, he can come in and go 1-2 or 2-1 in those 3 games and not let you go 0-3 and get you buried until your quarterback comes back. That's what I see from Bagent right now. And that's great. That's a big positive if he can be that type of guy, but don't expect more than that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used Tony Romo, and I had to look this up because I had to double check. He only appeared in 6 playoff games, and he only won 2 of those 6. So I'm not in this as a Bears fan for a couple playoff appearances. The consolation trophy of winning a division. I don't care. I want Super Bowls. I think I mentioned this in a group that we've talked in before, where I have 5 losing seasons, literally over. If in that 6th season, I can have a Super Bowl. That's ultimately it. And you don't get that with a Tony Romo-esque quarterback because you need everything to be perfect around that quarterback. Your defense has to be great. The weapons have to be top, and you need a couple lucky bounces to help you out. You really need that kaiju monster, Patrick Mahomes, right? Jalen Hurts is kind of ish getting into that level. Josh Allen, their offense is amazing right now. That's who you ultimately need. And I don't want to be stuck in the middle. Even if Bagent becomes a Tony Romo, like you said, which is a very low % chance, I don't need that. And in my opinion, this Justin Fields injury is one of the worst things that can happen for this Bears season.
Oh, it's terrible.
Because ultimately, I wanted answers. I just wanted as much information. I want as much statistics as I can on Justin to say, okay, this is where he is, or this is ultimately the quarterback he's going to be. And we don't have that now. Now he's going to miss 3-4 games. Now you have less data. And so now all of a sudden, let's say he comes back and we strings together a couple more week 4, week 5 performances. Is that enough for you now to say anything about him? And the answer is, if he misses 3-4 weeks, the answer is probably no.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough situation. So again, we'll wait with everyone else and see what the prognosis here with Justin, and just cross our fingers and hope that if he is going to miss any time, it's just a game or 2 and he can be back as quickly as possible. I want to talk a little bit about the rest of the offense, but before I do, for those of you listening live, thank you. We appreciate you. But if you've got any comments, questions, anything, make sure you drop them in the comments section. We will get to those here towards the end of the podcast. So, make sure you vent with us, because that was frustrating on so many levels to see this team play the way they did after, and I know that fourth quarter against Denver was rough, but 7 of the last 8 quarters, this team played really well. And it was tough to see them string that together, for 4 quarters. That was tough. But, in terms of the rest of the offense, it's really tough to kind of comment on the receivers based on kind of how much the passing game. It was nice to see DJ Moore get into the offense a little bit late in the game, but it was tough for him to get involved. Darnell Mooney had a nice gain, but we still need to see Darnell get involved more. But again, when the passing offense is where it is, which was literally 113 yards on 24 passes, you're just not going to be able to talk about the receivers too much. But the running game was effective. 36 carries, 162 yards, 4.5 yards per carry. Deontay Foreman did pretty well filling in here, considering how down they were with no Roschon, no Homer, and of course no Khalil Herbert. And Darrington Evans, for who he is, played pretty well. They got Valus involved on a couple runs that were fairly effective. So they ran the ball pretty well, and the offensive line, the run blocking seemed to be pretty well. A couple of things got blown up, but the pass blocking, Mason, from the offensive line really struggled today. They had a lot of issues. I think there were some scheme issues. Like you can't have Deontay Foreman trying to block Danielle Hunter one-on-one. And that's what led to a turnover, because he literally got blasted back into the quarterback. Like, you've got to be smarter than that. I mean, this goes back to like 2021, the Matt Nagy awful game against the Cleveland Browns. And we put that on Nagy. It's the Matt just leaving guys out to dry against Myles Garrett. And I think it was Clowney. Like, terrible, terrible game planning. You've got to be smarter on the offensive line in terms of what you're asking him to do, who you're asking running backs and tight ends to block. So that certainly played into it, but a lot of other struggles along the offensive line as well, especially with pass blocking.
Oh yeah, I mean, the pass blocking was absolutely horrendous, and then factor in the snapping issues.
Yeah, right. I was getting to Cody next.
Because when you said offensive line, I couldn't help but just go right my brain to Cody Whitehair, and you can go back to the offseason and talk about what's the thought process, and it was a good idea to be depending on Lucas Patrick at center, Cody Whitehair at center, having whatever that combination ultimately that was going to be. But they're a sieve all day long, and like you said, the scheme was an issue. Like, I love Deontay Foreman's running, but as you said, his pass blocking left a lot to be desired. There were multiple times where he just got worked. I thought there was going to be a lot more 12 personnel, more chipping, and again, even that too. I appreciate the thought process of, hey, I got to get out of my route, but there were too many times where the back would go chip, and their person is who ended up getting the sack, the tackle, whatever. You got to actually make an impact, and if they can't do that, then you can't have them leak out and be that outlet. You need, first things first, keep your quarterback upright. Second off, like I'm sure, like you said, you're going to get to, the entire play is thrown off if the snap is at your shins, if it's up almost above your head. It's just lucky that Bagent's as tall as he is and that Justin's as athletic as he is to be able to corral a lot of those snaps. And then you had Lucas Patrick get going in there once Whitehair got benched, and it wasn't really all that much better. And also, why are you trading for Feeney if you're just not going to have him be an option at this point? Because this is not going to work.
Yeah, and center is exactly where I was going to get next. I just want to bring up this one stat here really quick. Combined the Vikings defense, 5 sacks. We don't know pressures yet. 5 sacks and 8 quarterback hits. I mean, you get your quarterbacks hit 13 times in the span of a game, that you are going to get an injury. You just can't have that type of performance from the offensive line. Were there times did Fields hold on to the ball too long? A couple of times. Did Bagent do it once or twice? Absolutely. I'm not saying that everything's on the offensive line, but there were problems up and down those blocking and those protection schemes all game long. And like you said, when we're talking about center, we, and I talked about this, a couple of weeks ago, that, you're just going to have to, cringe when Cody's snapping the ball and hope it gets to Justin in between the numbers, high snaps, low snaps. It's just, you can't have this from your center on a regular basis. This is the NFL. This is not high school. You don't even expect this. You expect better snaps from a center and a good high school football team than what Cody Whitehair puts out there. And again, I don't understand, why Dan Feeney, and again, you want to sit there as fans and go, as a 6th-round pick, who cares? But you can't give up capital for nothing. And I think Dan Feeney has had two snaps on offense for the entire season. That's it. Like, we're now 6 games into this thing. It's not like we're 2 weeks in. Cody Whitehair Lucas Patrick is awful. His blocking has been dreadful. the first month of the season. Jenkins comes back, Whitehair slides over. We see things get better, and then you just hope Whitehair can snap. So then when you decide to bench Whitehair because the snaps are so poor today, where is Dan Feeney? And is he that bad in practice that it's already a sunk cost? Because you need to try something else. And I'm not saying that Dan Feeney is an all-pro. I expect Dan Feeney to be very mediocre if he does get an opportunity to play. But here's what I know. I know Lucas Patrick has failed at center, and I know Cody Whitehair is failing at snapping the football. So next man up is Dan Feeney. Give the man an opportunity to see if he can play. Maybe things improve. Maybe if they don't, but at least we'd have an answer. And next guy up, it might have to be Illinois, Doug Kramer. Yeah, like this is where we're at, because you can sit here and Nate Davis is now banged up, so it could be Jatiri Carter for a while here. But when you have Wright and you have some of these guys in place and you see improvement from the offensive line and it's not there from center, we absolutely need to have an answer at center, because it doesn't look like it's it doesn't look like it's Patrick, and it doesn't look like it's Whitehair. So it's time to give other people an opportunity to see if they can perform there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, what is happening at practice? The fact that a Feeney can't get a nod, that a Kramer maybe can't get a look. Is it just, hey, we're paying Whitehair this much, or he means like this is what he means to our locker room or offensive line in terms of communication? There's got to be something else going on there. And if not, I'm going to take this a step further. That's when you think about what's going on with Chris Morgan, your offensive line coach. What is he looking at? What is he seeing that ultimately he isn't able to see, well, in theory, what we're seeing when the product on the field, because the product isn't good.
Yeah, and you referenced the interview I did with Josh Lucas. One thing he brought up, because I asked him, because I thought that regime, especially on defense, developed a lot of day 3 players, right? Bilal Nichols was an impactful guy. Roy Robertson Harris was a UDFA, impactful guy. And I asked him kind of, how much does positional coaching play into that? And he said it absolutely can. And he brought up Jay Rogers, who left, I believe, with Brandon Staley when Brandon Staley went and become the defensive coordinator or the head coach of the Chargers. But Jay Rogers helped develop Akeem Hicks into a monster, helped Eddie Goldman really have a 3-year dominant stretch as a nose tackle, developed Bilal Nichols, developed Roy Robertson Harris. You had just dynamite guys on the defensive line, even if they were late picks and didn't have a lot of expectation, because Jay Rogers was a guy that helped develop these guys. And we're not seeing that. And this isn't just on Eberflus. This is a lot of Nagy. We kind of have seen this over the last 6-7 years. We have not seen a lot of guys outperform expectations. We have not seen, Darnell Mooney, okay, 5th round pick, and has become a contributor. I'm not saying they don't exist, but we certainly haven't seen it consistently. And we definitely haven't seen it along the offensive line, Braxton Jones aside. So I'm with you. Like Chris Morgan, just like Juan Castillo and all of them before, how much are they doing to help develop these players? Because you need to have depth on your offensive line. It's critical. We see it every year, not just because Tevin Jenkins is injury prone. I hate to use that term, but he is. And but you're not going to have your starting 5 on the offensive line play 17 games together. It's too violent in there. They're going to get banged up. You need to have depth. You can't have depth through free agency and day 1 and day 2 picks. Your depth on the offensive line has to come through developing day 3 picks. And we have consistently seen that the Bears just do not do that on a regular basis.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, you look at some of the most successful teams. I mean, look at the Eagles, right? They win in the trenches, and that's why they're as successful as they are on both sides of the ball. And I was willing to give Poles a bit of a break in that first year because there's so many holes to fill, and there's a big teardown. Then you're just throwing darts at a wall with 5th, 6th round picks to try to get some degree of depth and hope you'll hit on someone. But now you're moving into this next year where it says, okay, we got to start to try to become competitive. And clearly that just isn't the case when it comes to the offensive line. You're depending on veterans who are like Cody Whitehair, who is older, who has been injured, and who is losing a step. You're depending on, these backups like a Jatiri Carter to hopefully develop and become something. But, we've seen glimpses of him. He's been okay, nothing terrible, nothing amazing. Where are those? I mean, the Packers are another great example. They just seem to have offensive linemen fall out of the sky into their laps. And you have Tom, who's like actually very good for them and someone I wanted for the Bears in that process. So, we just keep moving up the chain of like who's to blame for these things. Whether it's the players, you talk about Chris Morgan. Now you also need to talk about Poles and the decisions he's making in both free agency and the draft. Yada yada yada. It's all bad.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and it's not just quarterback, because we hear that all the time. Well, you can't have this quarterback come to Chicago, will ruin him. But that's the thing, like Zach Tom. Would Zach Tom be this good in Chicago? I don't know, maybe, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. And I hate that argument. Well, if we got this player, they would stink. But I have a hard time finding a way to argue against it, because it happens year in and year out that we're just not seeing these guys develop. And it certainly comes down to coaching. And let's talk about coaching here for a little bit. And, I tweeted something out right before the post-game show that since George Halas, retired from coaching for good, Halas throughout his tenure there with the Bears over literally 55 years coaching, would take breaks and not coach for 3, 4, 5 years. And someone else would come in and coach for a few years and he'd get back on the sidelines. But 1967 was his final year coaching the Chicago Bears. Since then, there have been 12 head coaches of the Chicago Bears, and only 3 of them have had career winning records in Chicago. You all know them well. It's Mike Ditka, Lovie Smith, and Matt Nagy. And I know how much this fan base loathes Matt Nagy, and he's literally one of 3 guys in the last 55 years to have a winning record in Chicago. And that's the thing, like, even if you throw, 2018 was all Vic Fangio. Okay, fine. And Nagy has a losing record without that, but Nagy still has a better record without the 2018 season than guys like Mark Trestman and John Fox. So, and obviously Matt Eberflus. So we've continually seen coaching staffs that just underperform. I thought John Fox brought in a tremendous coaching staff. He brought in Fangio and Adam Gase and a few other guys that I really like, positional coaches. I love Stan Drayton, was the running back coach at the time. And even when you have a strong coaching staff, it still finds ways to fall apart here. But, forgetting the historical aspect of it, Matt Eberflus continues to just not perform, not rally this team, not have this team just came out flat again today. And I just don't understand how I get it. There's a little bit of an extra layoff, but you got to start building momentum as a head coach. If forget the defense, we can get to that in a minute. As the CEO of this team, you've got to rally this team. You've got to stack plays and wins and get this team motivated to play together. And it's just something that he just struggles with. And I'll be honest, when I see Matt Eberflus on the sidelines, when I see him at the podium, and I know these guys are professionals and they should be playing for whoever, but I have a hard time if I'm a 24, 25-year-old athlete looking at Matt Eberflus as a guy that I am just going to rally behind and play for. Like he just doesn't have that energy. Mike Tomlin, you may not, say, I know some people, I see some stuff on Twitter that Mike Tomlin's not the coach he used to be and everything. And maybe he's not, that's fine. But Mike Tomlin is going to have that locker room wanting to play as hard as they possibly can every week. He's a guy you will follow. And Matt Eberflus does not have that energy. He doesn't have Mark Trestman energy, but he certainly just does not have the type of energy and leadership that you need from that spot.
It's funny that you said that. I was literally going to say Mark Trestman and bring that up because the Bears keep getting these head coaches. I'm putting Matt Nagy aside. I think he brought at times more juice and things like that. But when you kind of go back, even to the success of a Lovie Smith, they keep getting these very even keel, low energy kind of guys. And going back to Eberflus, and again, like you said, putting the defense aside for a second, because his original goal was not to be in charge of the defense. His goal was to be CEO, culture guy, all that. What are you doing? What are you bringing? Like, what is the point of you? Because he's not the offensive guru like some of these other head coaches are. He wasn't supposed to be in charge of the defense. And so if you can't rally, if you can't motivate, what are you bringing to the table? And I would go and extend that to who's in charge, again, of this hiring and who's creating this. People tend to attract to people that they're like, right? It just is what it is. A lot of times you just enjoy being around people that you like. And I thought with this committee, right, that was putting together this list of head coach candidates to put in front of polls and all that would change. But ultimately, when you look at the type of coach that was put in front of polls, we heard these top 3 guys, they're all kind of the same. You didn't even do an interview for a Mike McDaniels down with the Dolphins. Like, why is he not getting a dang interview? Because he doesn't necessarily fit the people that are interviewing, right? It doesn't fit the McCaskies and what they want, and this just old school mom and pop shop. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're a 24-year-old and you're listening, like you said, to Matt Eberflus give you the pregame speech, I can imagine there's crickets when he's giving, this motivational part when he's trying to get these guys to rally together. Because again, like you said, it was flat. Soldier Field, from what we've heard, was flat from the beginning. This should have been like, all right, we got a win last week. Let's keep the momentum rolling. But instead it was the exact opposite. It was just felt like we were coming off of a week 2 loss versus the win that they had the previous week.
Yeah, and you bring up Mike McDaniel. I think it just shows the flawed process of the Bears with someone like Mike McDaniel, who's obviously having a lot of success with Miami. And I saw something, I don't remember if it was on TikTok or Twitter, but like Mike McDaniel speaking to an official before the game. The official came over just to kind of do the little pregame talk. Hey, make sure you speak with the line judge. He'll get my attention if you need to talk to me. Kind of just going through the things that officials do with the head coaches before the game. And Mike McDaniel goes, oh, I'm not worried about any of that. I'm just here for friendship. Right. And he has some fun with him. And, he says, I could never do your job. I don't know how you guys do it. And the official goes, well, I couldn't be a head coach either. And he goes, well, then we chose the right professions. Right. Like Mike McDaniel's just having fun. And I bring that up because you say, Mike McDaniel, how is he not interviewed? And I agree. But I also sit there and go, if Ted Phillips, Bill Polian, sat down and interviewed Mike McDaniel and just tried to engage with him and try and get his vision and everything, they would be sitting there looking at him cross-eyed. They'd be like, who is this guy? They wouldn't even understand who he is as a coach. And that's why that process is so flawed, and that's not to say Ernie Accorsi wasn't a wildly successful general manager in the NFL. He was. Bill Polian was a wildly successful general manager. Bill Polian, besides the Colts, also built up the Bills teams, the Jim Kelly Bills teams. That was Bill Polian too, if people don't realize that. Like, wildly successful. But the man's in his 80s. He hasn't been in the league for 10 or 15 years, whatever it was, continually trying to find coaches this way. And I don't know how much Trace Armstrong was pulling the strings back there, because both Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus are clients of Trace Armstrong. I don't know how much pull he had, but you need a president, a general manager, whoever it is. And that's why we're all crossing our fingers that Kevin Warren can finally do things the right way in Chicago, but we don't know if he will. It's just a wild card right now. The process the Bears go through to try and put together, a coaching staff and a front office is continually flawed. And it was this year. And Ryan Poles, I think, I think 99% of Bears fans agree the process that Ryan Poles did in terms of shedding bad contracts, getting more draft capital, the process is sound with Ryan Poles. The evaluations are what's questioning right now with Ryan Poles. And we're going to certainly continue to look at that throughout the rest of this year. But again, you have almost an arranged marriage again here with Eberflus and Poles. It's just the type of thing that just doesn't create synergy at Hallis Hall. And now we're sitting here 6 games into the season. The Bears are at 1-5. The season's basically over. I hate to say things like that, but this team has to get to 9-8 if they're going to be competitive, which means they need to go, 8-3 at this point, the rest of the way. And with some difficult games still coming up, that's almost an impossibility at this point. So now we're sitting here, it's mid-October, and, we rode high for 10 days after finally getting a win. And now we're right back to where we were without a lot of hope. And now we're sitting here going, we need to get rid of this coaching staff. But if we get rid of this coaching staff, that could mean the end for Justin Fields. A lot of us still want Justin Fields here and have an opportunity to grow. But he's tied to a terrible coaching staff now. Like, everything is so flawed and such a mess that you just don't know even how to get out of this and have positives for 2024. And it's October of 2023, Mason.
It's pretty remarkable that you can have so much of these negative feelings so early in a season, and with really no chance of hope, where even as in previous years, you've had the stupid in the hunt graphic that they like to put up, and the Bears are always just kind of in the hunt, especially when they added that extra playoff spot. That's just not the reality of where they're at right now. Like you said, right now, the best they can try to do is to try to figure out what the heck they need to do to fully revamp what is happening around here. And I'm one of the biggest pro Justin Field guys out there. And it just might be more of a timing issue at this point, especially, being hitched to this unfortunate coaching staff, this unfortunate setup where he doesn't have enough time to be able to get to where else we need to get to before a decision has to be made for fifth year option contracts, etc. There just might be too much that has to be fixed leading into it.
Yeah, and I think I say this basically every podcast I do. I want Justin Fields to succeed, and I'm honest when I say this. Of my lifetime, there has not been a quarterback that I've wanted to succeed in Chicago more than him. I had that much hope. I really thought it was going to come together. And if Justin Fields isn't going to succeed here, unless somehow he ends up as the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, I want him to succeed wherever he is, whether he's in New Orleans or Atlanta or somewhere in the AFC, with the Jets, wherever it might be, wherever he finds a place. I hope that he's successful, and we as Bears fans can go, well, we screwed that one up then clearly, because he had the success that we all thought he could have once he left this mess. But, kind of before we get to questions here, I do want to we haven't talked about the defense. So I do want to talk about the defense a little bit. And there were some positives, and obviously 19 points allowed. When one of them was a defensive touchdown, you'd sit there and say the defense played really well. Yeah, the defense was fine, but I didn't see a lot from the defense. Tremaine Edmonds made a nice play there for the interception. TJ Edwards had a couple big plays early. So there were some flashes from individuals. Yannick Ngakoue had got some pressure, some flashes from individuals. But as a collective unit, the 12 points they allowed defensively, I want to sit there and pat them on the back. And yes, they should get some credit, and Eberflus should get some credit. But at the same time, Mason, I saw a Vikings offense that consistently shot themselves in the foot on a regular basis. Drop passes, bad throws, poor decisions. It was a lot of unforced errors from this Vikings offense, where I sit there and watch this team and go, yeah, they stink. This is a bad Minnesota Vikings team. There's a reason they were 1-4 entering this game. They are not a good football team. And certainly they would have been better with Justin Jefferson out there. But when you don't have Justin Jefferson out there and you're looking at Madison with Cousins and Hawkinson's a fine tight end, Addison's inexperienced, KJ Osborne's a nice third wide receiver. He's not who you want as your second wide receiver. Not a lot of skills at the skill positions without Justin Jefferson there. And the Vikings offense, to me, just kind of looked like you would expect them to look without their best player, who's literally the best non-quarterback in the NFL. And to me, the defense was a benefit of some poor offensive play from the Vikings. Again, they didn't play terribly, but I don't think we should sit there and be like, wow, they only allowed 12 points. This was a great effort from the defense.
Yeah, the defense did enough in theory for you to win this game if your offense could have gotten itself together. However, like you said, they were handed a lot of stuff. Yes, they generated some pressure to allow Kirk Cousins to decide, I'm going to throw a backwards pass and almost give up a fumble. But you also didn't recover the fumble, right? And that's also kind of what you're expected to do. What they have two, and they also got 2 sacks today against an offensive line that has struggled a bit. And the Minnesota Vikings have been for the last couple of years known for a pretty stout run game when they had Dalvin Cook there. Madison just isn't that guy. He's very bleh, and he will continue to be bleh. And so when you're having a guy like a KJ Osborne and I believe Powell, number 4 out there, who is working your, in theory, CB1 and Jalen Johnson, that's a problem. And is some of it schemed? Yes. I hate the Bear scheme. I despise the Bear scheme. It's old school. It's been revamped a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but it still is not modern NFL defense. Modern NFL defense is what you saw Brian Flores doing, and just mad pattering all those blitzes and all that crazy stuff. That it's just not enough at the end of the day. It just isn't. They don't get a pass. They get a pat on the back, like you said, but I need to see it more consistently, and I need more flashes, right? We need more players to actually make game-changing plays. There was a couple here and there, but not ultimately enough.
Yeah, I actually honestly would say the defense played better against Washington when they gave up 20 points than they did in this game where they only gave up 12. And just a random side note, because I can't get it out of my head. So I was watching the game with my better half, and she's not much of a football fan. She's only half paying attention. But for some reason, every time Madison got the ball, she would just say Alexander Madison, like Alexander Hamilton. And just she kept saying it. I couldn't now use it. Every time I hear his name now, I can't get it out of my head. But again, for those of you listening live, I appreciate it. I see some comments coming in. We're going to get to those now. So if you got comments or questions, drop them in the comments section. We will discuss them now. And let's start here with Bearlissimo, who says that Tyler Scott played well. And I have to say, Tyler Scott had his best game as a pro. I don't think it was, off the charts amazing. I want to see Tyler Scott be able to, use that speed and get deep and stretch the field and do some things. I really thought he was going to be the kind of guy that came in for 6-7 snaps a game, and Justin Fields would always give him one deep shot. Like that's the kind of where I felt Tyler Scott was, but it was good to see him getting involved in the offense. He got some opportunities to catch footballs. He didn't drop didn't drop any balls, which, he sit there and say that's a minor thing, but that was an issue when he had opportunities in August. So good to see Tyler Scott getting involved in the offense, and maybe something without Chase Claypool there. Obviously ESB was injured here. There's, for 3 wide receiver sets, they need that extra guy to kind of step in and do some things. And I thought, I'm with you. Tyler Scott played well. I'd like to see some more opportunities for him, but nice to see him getting involved a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not much more to add there. I do wonder how much of that, because you saw most of that success later when Bagent was playing. Is it just the fact that Bagent and Tyler Scott had more time together, right? And because, like you said, Tyler Scott was much further down that depth chart. Field spent most of the summer trying to get on the same page with the DJ Moore, with the Chase Claypool. Quinton St. Brown obviously was the first man up once Claypool was traded away. So, is there a bit of a lack of chemistry between a Fields and Tyler Scott that they're trying to create on a fly that you saw maybe a little bit more with Bagent?
Yeah. All right. Let's get over to Jericho Thomas here. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I want to kind of talk about, conceptually moving forward for fans and what they should want. And Jericho Thomas says, so if Justin is out for some time, do we hope they lose and draft Caleb? All right. So here's what I'm going to say about this, because I don't want to spend a lot of time, about tanking and everything. I would say to Bears fans, let Bears fans fan however they want to fan. We all know that this season is a mess. Like, no one's going to sit here and be like, oh, what are you talking about? They're going to beat the Raiders. They're going to upset the Chargers. Everything's going to be fine. Like, we all understand where this is. If fans at this point are so frustrated that they want the Bears to lose out and get a new coach and Caleb Williams, that's fine. I don't think they're any less of a Bears fan if that's what they're cheering for. If you want to cheer for wins and you want this team to go 6-11 or 7-10, and get some momentum going into next season and build up for Justin, fine. Cheer for that as well. That's where kind of I am is I've seen a lot of hostility amongst Bears fans amongst each other. It's infighting about should they draft Caleb Williams? Should they keep Justin Fields? The bottom line is here, Jericho, we don't know how long Justin's out. We're not going to know for a couple days. So maybe he's out a game. Maybe he's back next game. Maybe he's out 6 weeks. We don't know the situation. So for me, I mean, look, if he's out a long period of time, it's going to be really hard for him. I mean, he's going to have to come back and look like Patrick Mahomes if he's going to keep his job. If he's out 6 weeks, something like that, and doesn't come back here until December. But if he's just out a couple games at this point with me, Mason, because I know you're a big Justin Fields fan, and I try to be as objective as I can. We all try to be objective when we analyze this team. Like, I get the positives of Caleb Williams, despite his awful game against Notre Dame. I get the positives about sticking with Justin Fields. So for me at this point, I'm just going to tell Bears fans, fan however you want to fan, and we'll see where we're at in January.
I'm at this point just going to sit back and let the season play out and see what happens, right? Like, I'm not going to sit there and stress because the Bears win 4 games and it reduces your chances at a Caleb Williams. I'm not going to sit there and stress because at this point, Justin does come back next week and looks bad like he did today before he got hurt. I'm just going to let whatever happens because at this point in time, there's only so much emotional energy I can keep putting into this from that perspective. And honestly, there's nothing that I do that's going to affect it too. So in terms of what you want to hope they do, like ultimately you hope that pieces look better. You hope that DJ Moore keeps being DJ Moore. You hope that Tevin Jenkins stays healthy and can potentially be a part of your future. You hope that these players on defense that were brought in, whether it's through the draft and a Dexter and a Pickens through the draft, or some of the free agents you brought in a Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, that they can keep producing and looking like a good team. Because whoever ultimately is at quarterback for you next year, you need those players to be good. You need those players to ascend. So really you're hoping for these pieces.
Yeah, and here's what I would say to Bears fans, regardless of whether you're cheering for Fields or you want Caleb Williams, whatever, irrelevant. As fans as a whole, you should, and it doesn't matter if you're cheering for losses or wins right now at this point for the Bears, but Caleb Williams and Drake May, you should want them to be as good as possible. Because if the Carolina Panthers give the Bears the first or second pick, and they lost today to Miami, even despite jumping out 14-0, the Dolphins scored, I think, 42 straight points after that. So the Panthers are bad. And there was a report that came out, I think it was yesterday, that the Panthers look like they might be planning to sell off some pieces, over the next few weeks. That's fantastic news for the Bears. The worse that team is, the better. There's no guarantee they're going to have the number one pick, but they certainly look like they are going to give the Bears a top 3 pick. No matter how many wins the Bears get, they're going to have a top 3 pick. So for the best thing for the Bears is for Caleb Williams and Drake May to be really good, because I saw plenty of Bears fans ripping into Caleb Williams because they're Justin Fields fans, and that's fine. I even saw some ripping into Drake May and making him the next Mitch Trubisky. Like, to me, you want these guys to be so good, because if the Bears forget the number 1 pick, let's say the Arizona or New England gets the number 1 pick, they take Caleb Williams. It's not even on the radar. The number 2 pick, like, you want the decision to say, do we take Marvin Harrison with this selection, or do we have a giant package from another team that wants to trade up for Drake May? And maybe we can't get Marvin Harrison, but we could get Fashanu or one, Brock Bowers or one of these other really highly talented players. So the best thing for the Bears is for those first 2 picks, assuming they are going to be Williams and May, to be as valuable as possible, because look what Ryan Poles was able to do with the number 1 pick for Bryce Young. And everyone right now who's an expert is saying that May and Williams are both better prospects than Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And DJ Moore and a future first-round pick, because of the fact that they had the number 1 pick. So if they are in that position again, Mason, you want these guys to perform well. It's not Justin Fields versus Caleb Williams. It's if Caleb Williams is good, whatever the Bears decide to do, it's better for the Bears. The better he can perform at this season at USC.
Exactly. You want all of your assets to keep gaining value. I don't care if your asset you're talking about is, the first your 2 picks you're going to have, or your asset you're talking about is Justin Fields. You want all of those values to keep going upward, because ultimately that's just the best business for you going forward.
All right. And I'm just going to quick second here on Sean Richards, who says the front office should be honest with fans and let us know that we are tanking to have the 1 and 2 picks in the draft. That is not the case, Sean. Again, the Panthers, whatever they do is what the Panthers do. This team did not set out this year to try and have the number 2 pick. Now, if they are sitting there at 2-12, and they've got 3 games to go, and suddenly we see them sit Justin Fields down for Nathan Peterman or something, those type of things can happen. Justin Fields did not play in week 17, or I guess it was week 18 last year for a reason. Was he banged up? But Justin Fields also said in interviews at the Super Bowl that he could have played. So Justin Fields sat because the Bears knew if they lost and the Texans won, they'd have the number 1 pick. I'm confident that was the case, but in no way is this team in October trying to gear up for the 1st and 2nd pick. They are still, this is a coaching staff that knows they're on the hot seat. Ryan Poles does not know his future with this franchise. This is a franchise that wants victories right now.
Yeah, players don't tank, coaches don't tank. Front offices do sometimes, but like you said, that's not the case. The Bears wanted wins. The owners want wins. It just so happens that they're just not good at coaching.
Yeah. And I'm going to do one more comment here, and that is Cornelius Squalls, who says, I nominate Brian Flores as the next Bears head coach. I think that's an interesting comment, just because a lot of Bears fans I've seen lately have said that they're sick and tired of the brand new head coach, that they want a head coach with experience. Something like John Fox, obviously he had experience, didn't work out there, but a guy that has had some level of success. Brian Flores, of course, just did a pretty good job here on an offense that was clicking the last couple of weeks. And he did kind of get a rough deal there in Miami, before they let him go. But I will say this, from what I have heard about people, Brian Flores is a tough guy to have around, I'll just say Hallis Hall, around your practice facility. He likes things his way. He doesn't really like to listen to other alternatives. You can like him as a head coach. He's a hard-nosed guy. He's a smart defensive guy. There are plenty of positives with Flores, and a guy that I really wanted them to consider as a head coach previously. But I have heard some things that he's not the easiest guy to have. And we just talked about earlier in this podcast, wanting to have the GM and head coach have some good synergy because that's what's best for a franchise moving forward, especially this franchise. I don't know if you'd get there with Brian Flores.
Yeah, ultimately, when last year we were kind of putting together our rankings of head coach candidates and GM candidates, Brian Flores was number one on my list for a lot of the reasons you just said. Head coach experience. I think he got a bit of a bad rub with Miami. A very smart guy, no nonsense guy that can control a locker room. But at the end of the day, too, these are adults. I mean, we've all had bosses that, while they might be very good at their job, we don't like working for them or with them because they do tend to be a bit abrasive, and that's something that really is going to ultimately impact this. My other question would be, who are you bringing on along as your offensive coordinator? He had some problems with that in Miami, a lot of changing of that seat. Like, I would, if I'm Ryan Poles and Brian Flores is interviewing with me, I would have to have a lot of questions answered, and you need to have a very solid plan of how you're going to fill that.
Yeah, because here's what I would say beyond that with Brian Flores, and you brought up the offensive coordinator situation. Whether, if Matt Eberflus is gone after this season, and it certainly seems like it's trending that way, whoever the next coach of the Bears is, and it doesn't matter whether they're coaching Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Justin Fields, whoever the QB1 is for the Chicago Bears in 2024, I really, really want an offensive head coach to be the Bears head coach. Johnson in Detroit is a guy that I really like. That's the kind of guy I'm circling right now as a possibility. Because here's what I want for whether it's Justin Fields or a new quarterback, I want stability. Like Luke Getsy, let's just say that Justin Fields was amazing this year, had, almost MVP caliber numbers and everything was great. Luke Getsy's gone. Right, he takes a head coaching job because of Justin Fields' performance this year, and now whether they bring in someone new or they're promoting their QB coach Jonico, whatever it is, it's much tougher to keep stability on offense when you have a defensive head coach, because every time your offensive coordinator puts together a great season, there's a chance they're leaving as a head coach. And I think it's a lot easier to have stability on the defensive side of the ball with your defensive coordinator changing. Because, especially if you can keep the same kind of defensive mindset and scheme, you may not have as good of a defensive play caller. You could get hurt there. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but offensively, like the idea, of having Matt Nagy with Mitch Trubisky, like if that marriage would have worked and Nagy is going to stay with him, that makes more sense to me. That's what I'm looking for. So Brian Flores, you mentioned a lot of the positives he has, but the negative being he's a defensive-minded coach. He's going to have to bring in an offensive coordinator who, if that offensive coordinator does really well, they leave. And if they don't do well, then you're changing over. Then it's Jay Cutler with a new offensive coordinator every year. Doesn't have the stability to grow in a system. So to me, this next coach of the Chicago Bears really should be an offensive-minded head coach. That's my preference.
I mean, I would agree with you there. I think the last coaching cycle, there wasn't really that offensive guy to lean towards, and hence I think why they shifted away from it. Plus, the Bears seem to like to they overreact. So you have a defensive guy, offensive guy, defensive guy, offensive guy every other year. A good example is going to be the Texans. What are they going to do? Because their offensive coordinator might actually be moving on with what's happening with CJ Stroud. So now, can DeMeco Ryans continue that magic when you don't have maybe the guy that was helping Stroud along? So that's just something I'm not super comfortable with. So I would agree. I would probably prefer someone who can instill their offensive identity and culture and to be able to maintain that consistently.
All right, to wrap up, we'll just kind of do some final thoughts here. Thank you, everybody who commented. Thank you, everyone who's listening live. We appreciate you more than you can possibly imagine. But, final thoughts here, Mason. To me, disappointment. Like, if I was just going to give one word, that's what this felt to me, because, it doesn't take much for the Bears fan base to get some life, breathed into it and get excited. And, we saw the build, right? We had the performance from the Broncos game. They still couldn't quite get over the top. Then they put it together for the Washington game. The secondary's getting healthy, like the stars were aligning to sit here and go, all right, they're 1-4, but they're getting healthy. They beat the Vikings. That's 2 wins. They beat the Raiders. That's 3 wins. 3-4, like suddenly, even with the Chargers game, then it's the Saints. That's not impossible. The Panthers, like you look at the schedule and go, well, if they're 5-5, that's not an impossibility, right? We as Bear fans, because we cling to the positives because there's never that many. Like, you could see the path to relevance, and to see them play like this again. Now, I guess, sure, they could beat the Raiders next week, but again, is that going to get you excited when the Chargers are sitting there? This is the team I look at and go, well, this team can't beat the Saints. The team that showed up against Washington can, but the team that showed up today can't beat the Saints. Sure, they could beat the Panthers, but if they're sitting there at 3-7, that schedule gets tougher with a couple games against Detroit. There, it's a little tougher there the last 6-7 weeks of the season. So to me, when I think about, what's my reaction to this game, it's disappointment, because they had an opportunity to build on something and they regressed in almost every spot on the football field and looked a lot more like the team that lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers than the team that beat the Washington Commanders.
When the bullets start flying, people tend to go back to what they're comfortable with, right? And that seems exactly what happened here, where whether you're talking about the scheme and what Getty called, whether you're talking about Justin and his footwork, his mechanics, and his vision, or even you can argue lack thereof, at times you go back to your basics, you go back to what's locked in. And right now, this is what the Bears' basics are, right? This is what their fundamentals are. And that's an inherent problem with this team. Now, going forward, is there still some opportunity for silver linings? 100%. But as of right now, like you said, disappointment is the key word here.
All right. So for those of you who listen here live, appreciate you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Of course, plenty to come on the Windy City Gridiron podcast channel and the Second City Gridiron YouTube page all week. You're going to have Bear and Balanced on Monday. You'll have my Bears banter coming in on Wednesday. Of course, you'll have, Bears Over Beers with EJ and Jeff, and of course Mason's Bare Bones, and finish that off with Taylor and Making Monsters. I'm not sure who she's got this week, but always an intriguing angle with her, kind of highlighting players and T formation conversation. So we'll have plenty of Bears content all week. Hopefully you're going to want to hear it after this one, but I'm sure we'll have more answers about what's going on with Justin Fields, and I'm sure Mason can expand upon that on Bare Bones this Thursday, so make sure you're tuning in there. Mason, appreciate you joining this one again. I really had hopes we were going to have a really positive game here to talk about, but unfortunately, like you said earlier, they bared it up. But thank you for joining anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I actually had another hat set aside that I was going to wear. It was my more celebratory hat, and I had to go to the closet and get the upside down sad one.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hang in there. We'll it'll get better at some point. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but at some point it'll get better for this team. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Adios.